Good evening, this is Jonathan Rigney, and welcome to this week's edition of Fantasy Football Recap as I go over Week 1 of the 2022 Peckerheads fantasy football season. I think I speak for everyone saying how glad I am to have the NFL finally back. We had some great games with some wild finishes and plenty of upsets. Both of those things are what make the NFL so darn great. Let's get started off with the matchup between myself and Cody Abear. Both of us got off to a hot start Thursday night, with both of our star wide receivers balling out, with Cooper Kupp scoring 36 for me and Stephon Diggs scoring 33 for Cody. Looked like it was going to be a really close matchup after Thursday night. But in fantasy football, things quickly change. While Cody had disappointing performances in the 1 o'clock window from his two running backs, Travis Etienne and Chase Edmonds, and even his star tight end Kyle Pitts, those three players only scoring a combined 20 points altogether. But his team was highlighted by a surprising performance from the Steelers' defense against the Bengals, forcing 5 turnovers, one of those being a pick six, and a block kick, all scoring 28 points. While as for me, my 1 o'clock guys, most of them had pretty average performances, but the main highlight was my flex running back, Elijah Mitchell, scoring only 4 points and leaving with an injury, now being revealed he will be out for 2 months. Not good for me at all. While I was still projected to lose after the 1 o'clock window, there was still a chance for me to win this matchup, but Justin Jefferson happened. Yes, Cody's other star wide receiver, having a field day, scoring 44 points, 9 catches, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns, and with that 44 points being the number one fantasy player overall this week, as that pretty much sealed the deal for me, as Cody was able to cruise to a 172-133 victory. His 172 points being the highest point total of the week. Of course, that's my log. Now we move on to the next matchup, which was between Clint Abear and Zach Ballard. While Clint didn't have anyone Thursday night, Zach's team did not get off to a great start, with his tight end, Dawson Knox, only scoring 1 point. Always a danger with Dawson Knox, as he only seems to be targeted in the red zone, and he can have plenty of those 1 or 0 type point performances. But the 1 o'clock window on Sunday was highlighted by plenty of disappointment from Clint's stars, as Alvin Kamara and Deebo Samuel only combining for 18 points, a huge disappointment. And to make things even worse, his almighty Saints defense going up against the supposed lowly Falcons offense, scoring only 3 points. Not good at all. And even Amari Cooper only scoring 4. It wasn't a great start for Cody. As for Zach, both of his star running backs, Christian McCaffrey and Joe Mixon, both played in the 1 o'clock window, as McCaffrey scored an underwhelming 15 points. Yeah, 15 points is very underwhelming for him, as he almost always scores. Seems like every time he's healthy, he scores always 25 points or more. But Joe Mixon made up for it, scoring 21 points. Those two combining to score 36, which is a decent days for those two, as the running backs are the big strength of Zach's team. But Clint got right back into the game with his quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, putting up another one of his classic September performances, as he threw for 364 yards and 5 touchdowns, scoring a grand total of 36 points. And it rounded out with his running back Connor scoring a decent 15 points. I think it was a couple below his projected total, but still not bad. As for Zach, Justin Herbert scored he was average, 23 points, pretty good. But Keenan Allen scoring only 10 points and leaving with an injury, and you do not like to see in a close matchup guys leaving with injuries, as it could very well come back to bite you and unfortunately for Zach, it did, as it came all the way down to Sunday Night Football. Zach had a 1-point lead. He had Ezekiel Elliott, and Clint had Dalton Schultz. But in the end, Zeke was not able to get enough touches, as Dalton Schultz was able to do enough for Clint, as he came through with a 100 low-scoring victory, but close victory. Now, Lambert and Tanner. The start of this game, disappointing is an understatement for both of these teams. Starting with Lambert, who he had Cam Akers Thursday night, who fantasy experts have said all before the season started to stay away from drafting him, but that did not start Lambert. He ignored them, and Akers responded by putting up a big fat goose egg in week 1, scoring a big fat 0. Only worse, only getting 3 touches of the ball, as that does not look good at all for Cam Akers going forward. As for Tanner, he had Allen Robinson, who many expected to greatly improve this season, going from the lowly Bears to the offensive-friendly Rams. But unfortunately, he did not do that in week 1, as getting only 1 catch and scoring only 2 points. But in his defense, Matthew Stafford only seemed like he was targeting light-skinned receivers. Moving on to Sunday, as while Lambert had some bright spots, which included A.J. Brown scoring 30 points in his Eagles debut, and a good performance from Lamar scoring 21, just plenty of disappointments for Lambert. With his first-round pick, Najee Harris only scoring 10, ended up, I think, leaving with an injury, but it seems like they said he will be fine, which is a big break for Lambert, which he also had disappointments from his 2 receivers, DJ Moore scoring only 7, and CeeDee Lamb, his second-round pick, only scoring 4, and whose value could only maybe get worse going into the future, with Dak Prescott's injury sidelining him for 6 to 8 weeks and having to catch balls from Cooper Wash. But as for Tanner, after his disappointing performance from Allen Robinson, he was carried by big performances from Michael Pittman with 32, Travis Kelce, who scored 31, Jalen Hurts, who scored 40, and Jalen Hurts, who scored 24, capped off with a pretty good performance from Mike Evans, scored 18. And while Austin Eckler, his first-round pick, only scored 10, disappointingly, his big performances and Lambert's disappointments were able to carry him to a 135-111 victory. Next is Riley Metz versus Ben Rigney. As both Mets had Gabriel Davis, the receiver for the Bills, who a lot of people thought he would break out this year, who started to break out toward the end of last year, within the divisional round game against the Chiefs, having 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, one of the best playoff performances ever. He got off to a pretty good start with 18 points, which is very promising. As for Ben had no one, but he started off just like, it almost seems like deja vu for Ben, leaving Bills defense on the bench, who surprisingly scored 24 points for the 24 points against the great Rams offense. But that's no surprise, as of course, because the Bills defense is on Ben's bench, and at this point Ben is just getting used to it. As we move on to Sunday, Mets had plenty of good performances. Antonio Gibson scoring 19, his fantasy value skyrocketed after Brian Robinson got shot like 6 hours after being named the starting running back. It's kind of sus if you ask me. Tyreek Hill scoring about his average projected points, 17, and Christian Kirk, the new receiver for the Jags, scoring 22. Very impressive. But Mark Andrews the star tight end, one of the best tight ends in fantasy, only scoring 10, kind of disappointing, but the other performances from Metz made it up. As for Ben, he had a good performance from Nick Chubb, scoring 20 points. He's limited in the pass catching game, but he's one of the best running backs, pure runners in the league, and he was able to score 20 points. But he had disappointing performances from T. Higgins, who left hurt, scoring only 4 points. David Montgomery scoring only 7. I mean, thanks to some catches, it was really uglier than that. 17 carries for 26 yards. Yikes. Yards per carry under 2. Anything under that is really bad. But Ben got back right into it in the 4 o'clock window as Devontae Adams, who is now on the Raiders, having a huge debut performance for them, scoring 35 points as old college teammates Derek Carr and Devontae Adams picking right back up where they left off. And while Dalvin Cook only scored 13 points, kind of underwhelming. That 35 from Adams was able to get Ben right back into the game. As for Mets, Kirk Cousins had his quarterback had 19, which is above average. They played a really good game against the Packers, just blowing them out. But the disappointment was Derrick Henry only scoring 8 points, as that's the danger with Derrick Henry, as he is very limited in the he's very limited in the pass catching game, and if he doesn't get in, combine that when he doesn't get in the end zone, it could be very much disappointment. That is the big threat taking him that high. But it was a 129 to 100 going into Sunday Night Football. Mets' team was done, and Ben still had Dak Prescott and Broncos defense, and it looked like it was going to be a thrilling finish. But a huge, huge disappointment for Dak Prescott, having one of the worst games of his career, scoring only 4 points. And on the cherry on top, getting hurt, that's going to sideline him for 2 weeks and has forced Ben to find a new quarterback, which now seems like to be Carson Wentz. And that 4-point performance from Dak Prescott was basically the end. Broncos defense had an outside chance, to score 26, but Geno Smith's performance early in the game quickly put Ben's hopes for a victory away, as Mets was able to hold them off, winning 129-114. And the final matchup this week was Jesse against the defending champs Brad, as Brad picking right back up where he left off with a great performance from Josh Allen, scoring 32, as you will expect more performances like that consistently in the future. As for Jesse, he picked up a tight end after his tight end was hurt. I can't remember who it was. He picked up Tyler Higbee. He scored 8. About what he was projected. But as we move on to the 1 o'clock window, Jesse had Jonathan Taylor picking right back up where he left off from last year, scoring 32 points. But Brad, great performances in the early window. DeAndre Swift, 31. Miles Sanders, 17. Jamar Chase, 33. Jalen Waddle, 18. And Miles Sanders, 17. Kind of surprising, as you can never really know what to expect. But no surprise that he plays well on Brad's team. But as it looked like Brad had the big advantage early on, but Jesse's team made a comeback. Saquon Barkley being the number 1 running back this week, scoring 38 points, which is a very promising sign for him going forward. And as for Brad, Mike Williams did not put up a great performance, only scoring 3. Packers defense only scoring 1. That got Jesse right back into the game, as going into Monday Night Football, it was 154-103, with Jesse having Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy. Still a very outside chance of him winning, but it looked like he had hope, as in the second, it looked like it was hopeless after the first quarter, as Russ was not targeting hardly any of his receivers. But Jesse got hope right back as Russ hit Jerry Jeudy with a big 60-plus yard touchdown that got him right back into the game as Jeudy ended up going over 100 yards and scoring 27. Russ went over 300 yards for him and scoring 21. It was going down to the wire. The final drive with Brad having a 3-point lead and only 4 points Jesse needed on that final drive for the Broncos to be able to get him a victory. But Jerry Jeudy dropped a wide open pass that would have been that would have been 2 extra points there that would have gotten him within 1. But in the end, he wasn't targeting him at all. He was just check downing it to Javonte Williams a lot on that drive. Ended up having to settle for a boneheaded 64-yard field goal instead of putting it in your hands of your new quarterback. But it was a disappointing end. But it was a great for Jesse. But it was a great, tight, high-scoring game with Brad ended up winning 154 to 151. As we look towards next week, we have a couple battles between 1-0 teams, Brad and Clint, and Riley and Cody, and we had a couple battles between a couple 0-1 teams, Zach and myself, and Jesse and Lambert, and then we got a battle between a 1-0 and an 0-1 team, Ben and Tanner. As these we should have another great week of football this coming week, with Thursday Night Football getting underway tomorrow with the Chargers and Chiefs. Should be a great game. And that is all for this week. I will see you next week. I'll see you next Wednesday. This is Jonathan Rigney, ESPN.